Hi, I'm Vicky Payne. I'm veterinary consultant for Oscars and Breakthrough, and today we're going to talk about lead reactivity in dogs. So lead reactivity is pretty common. It's one of the most common things that I get behaviour appointment requests for. And there's some maybe worrying statistics from the 2003 PDSA Paw report, where 12% of owners were stating that their dogs were showing behaviours such as growling, snapping and biting unfamiliar dogs. They also found that generally vets and owners and other dog professionals were all feeling that reactivity in dogs was on the rise. So perhaps the first thing to think about is, what do we mean by reactivity, and lead reactivity in particular? So these are dogs who, when meeting other dogs, are not behaving in a normal way. They're often showing what appears to be aggressive behaviour, but it's important to understand that the growling and the barking and the snapping usually comes from a place of fear and anxiety. Lead reactivity is possibly slightly different to lead frustration. So lead frustration can look really similar. We still have a dog who's maybe whining, yapping, barking, straining at the end of the lead to get towards another dog. But in these situations, the dog is more overexcited probably than fearful or anxious. But I tend to treat the two very similarly, because in both cases we have a dog who is not responding in the correct manner and is not having, I guess, a good emotional time. If you're frustrated, that is equally as negative as feeling fearful or anxious. So I will tend to think about them both the same. If we think about why these cases are on the rise, it can seem a bit of a cop-out to say, oh, COVID lockdowns, but I think that the COVID lockdowns genuinely were a problem for these dogs. So quite a lot of people went out and got puppies, got dogs, because their lifestyle now meant that they could have a dog. But the opportunities for correct socialisation were minimal. I actually think that it was a great time to socialise dogs, because what we want in a well-socialised dog is that the dog is happy around other people, around other dogs, but can do what I call the wave and say good morning. So my ideal dog is walking along with me on the lead in a populated area. A person goes past, a kitty goes past, another dog goes past, and they acknowledge that dog, maybe have a quick sniff, no more than a 3-second sniff, the equivalent of saying, morning, isn't it a lovely day? And then we walk on. And actually a situation where people should have been keeping their distance from you and shouldn't have been wanting to touch your dog actually gave a lot of opportunities for that. But I think because people couldn't access training classes, couldn't access really good behaviour and training advice, then bad socialisation happened, or no socialisation happened. So by bad socialisation, I mean that over-social dog who only met up with friends at, say, an enclosed field. Basically everybody got there, took off the leads, all the dogs had a cracking good time, ran around, played, but didn't really learn any manners. So if all of those dogs were of a similar age, a similar size, engaging in a lot of rough and tumble play, really important stuff for dogs, don't get me wrong, but they didn't learn that all dogs don't play like that, and that all dogs don't necessarily want to play with them. On the converse, they might not have met any dogs at all, and then they're going to be very fearful about any dogs that they do meet. So we've got two ends of the spectrum there. And some of the over-social dogs, the reason that I will treat lead frustration in a similar way to lead reactivity is that quite a common thing that I've seen is an over-friendly dog who has bowled up to everybody on or off lead, and at some point a dog has gone, I don't want this, I don't want your attention, I don't want you in my face, and has maybe snapped back at that dog. They will bounce back from that on a few occasions, but depending on the breed, depending on the upbringing of the dog, depending how resilient they are, at some point they'll get fed up of that. And we can go from a dog who was over-social to a dog that goes in first in an aggressive way, because it's like, well, every time I go to say hello to anybody, they just growl at me, so I'll growl first. It's vitally important as pet owners and as pet professionals that we teach our dogs an appropriate way to respond around other dogs when they're both on and off the lead. Something that I hear really often when dealing with reactive dogs is owners who say, oh, but he's fine when he's off the lead. And this is generally true. The reason that the lead causes a problem is because it's limiting the number of ways in which the dog can respond to a situation. So your dog's walking along, sees usually another dog, we'll talk about other triggers in a minute, but sees another dog, it's like, oh, I don't know about them, I'm a little bit anxious, I'm a little bit fearful. There's a whole number of ways that they can respond, and we call those the 5 Fs. So people know that in that aroused situation, they know about flight and fight, people know those. So you can see already that in the two that most people will understand, that we've taken one of those away. So the dog can no longer choose to run away from the situation, or not necessarily run, but just take themselves away from that situation. They're now stuck on a 2-metre lead with their human attached to it. And this leaves them fight as an option. They do have some other options. So dogs don't really do fainting. There are some animals that will get out of a hazardous situation by pretending to be dead. Dogs aren't generally one of those. Fiddle about or flirt, or other words that begin with F. This is a really useful technique which dogs may know or can be taught, but again it's limited slightly by being on the lead. So if you watch dogs interact off the lead, a dog who isn't interested in interacting with another dog might become really interested in a smell, wander off and do something else. They might show flirty behaviour, so you might see this sort of flicking the bum in other people's faces. You know, if somebody wants to mate with you, you're probably not going to fight with them. It's not a bad ploy. But we've taken that away by having them on the lead. Again, they've got a limited opportunity to interact with the other dog if they're on the lead. The final one that we can see is freezing. And this is one that owners might not recognise as being part of a dog being anxious about a situation. So you'll see a dog that just becomes very still. In fact, some people may even think that their dog is okay with that situation because the dog is standing perfectly still. But actually that's a warning sign to me that that dog is uncomfortable. They've just chosen to freeze. They're hoping that the other dog will get bored and move on. But if the other dog doesn't get bored and move on, or doesn't read those signals, or to be fair, the owners don't read those signals, they might then feel that, okay, me kind of ignoring you and pretending you weren't there hasn't worked, so now I'm going to have to growl and snap. Generally, when dogs are off the lead, they can interact much more freely and make better decisions. So that's why the lead is a problem. The other thing to consider with lead reactive dogs, and something that I hear, is, well, sometimes he's fine and sometimes he's not, and I don't understand why. And there can be two things. So one, the dogs that trigger your particular dog might not always be the same dogs. A dog who is very polite, is good at body language, who has learnt what I call the kind of, morning and isn't it a nice day greeting, may not trigger your dog. So if the other dog is walking along minding his own business, kind of glances at your dog, goes hi dog and walks on, then that might not be perceived by your dog as a threat. It might be very specific types of dog. So I have a dog who is not super happy with black Labradors that she doesn't know, because in the past male black Labradors have been a little bit in your face, on your back, not really listening to her signals that she's not comfortable. She's also not super keen on pointy dogs, so anything with a pointy snout and pointy ears. Weirdly though, she doesn't react to some dogs who are displaying what looks like quite aggressive behaviour to me, so I can only assume that what they're saying sounds aggressive to me but doesn't sound aggressive to her. It might also not be dogs that are the problem, it might be certain types of people, so people in hats, people with walking sticks, excitable children. Those people may have a dog with them, but it might not actually be the dog that your dog is reacting to. So it's worth having a bit of a thought and trying to think, well, what actually triggers my dog most? Is it all dogs? Is it certain types of dog? Is it certain types of people? Because that will help you later on work with that dog. It's also worth considering what else has happened on the walk. So there's something that we call trigger stacking, and this means that maybe if your dog was having a lovely time and after a nice half-hour walk they met one dog that was a bit grumpy with them, they'd be able to brush it off. However, if they had had a really stressful journey in the car, and then a dog had barked at them, and then some cyclists had gone past that they didn't really like, and then it was their least favourite type of dog with their least favourite type of person, they're far more likely to react. So it's worth thinking about all of those things when you're assessing why these dogs are reactive. So here's a little confession. I really love working with reactive dogs. Having had one myself, she taught me an awful lot about working with reactive dogs, and now I find them really quite enjoyable to work with. The reason being is that we can turn them around generally pretty quickly. So if we think about what we're trying to do with the reactive dog, we're taking them from negative feelings. So, oh God, there's a dog coming near me. Are they going to attack me? I'm really anxious that they're going to attack me. I'm frightened that they're going to attack me. Or, oh God, I want to go and say hello, but then I'm going to get told off by my owner and maybe told off by the dog. And so taking them from all these negative feelings where they then feel they've got to take some action, so lunge at the dog, bark, all those sort of things, to one where they go, oh yeah, there's a dog. That's pretty cool. we've got to think about what's reinforcing in the behaviour that they're doing. So you might say, well, if they're scared of dogs, why are they lunging at them? Why are they barking at them? Why are they trying to get into a fight? They're not. They're really kind of just giving off really big signals, putting out a big doggy placard that says, stay away from me, I'm horrible. And it works. So if you're a dog and you're walking along and you don't want to interact with another dog, if you start barking, generally either your owner is going to drag you away or the other owner is going to drag their dog away. And it worked. So every time that as a dog you are barky and lungy and generally unpleasant, if that works every time because the interaction with the other dog that you didn't want to happen doesn't happen, it worked, you win. And dogs are pretty simple. Things that work for them they will do more often. I think most of these dogs though don't want to feel like this, and the more they feel they're having to defend themselves all the time on the walk, the less pleasant that walk is going to be. So imagine if you were out walking and people keep giving you unwanted attention, wolf whistling or trying to grab you or things like that. If you were having to keep saying, just go away, I'm not interested, just leave me alone, your walk wouldn't be very relaxing, you'd be really stressful. And then even if some lovely person was going to offer you a cake or something, a free cake outside a cafe, you could be like, oh, for God's sake, leave me alone. Oh, sorry, you were actually a nice person. So we need to give our dogs better ways to deal with this. We can't control all the other dogs out there, so all we can control is ourselves and our dogs. Now, there are loads of different ways of dealing with reactive dogs, and I'm not going to discuss all of them. I've developed a pretty simple approach which works for most dogs myself. The first thing that we need to do is protect those dogs, and then later on in the process we need to change how they feel. So the first thing is avoiding these conflicts. So you don't necessarily need to become a midnight dog walker, going out in the early hours of the morning to avoid other people. But when you're starting to rehabilitate a reactive dog, I probably would avoid really heavy doggy places, and especially places dogs are going to be off the lead, because you can't, your dog might be on the lead behaving herself really nicely, but you can't do anything about those dogs that run up. So I would start in relatively quiet areas, even if that means loading the dog up and taking them for a drive. If you really need them to have some off-lead blasting time, absolutely. There are loads of secure fields now where you can hire a field for a period of time and have some fun. But okay, we're going to work on our lead reactivity. So as long as my dog was pretty okay with people, I would choose a less obvious doggy area. So for me, I quite like to go up to like a trading estate where you've got DIY shops, maybe a supermarket, things like that. Because you've got cars, you've got people, you might see an occasional dog, but there's not going to be that many dogs up there compared to going to the park, and any dogs that there are going to be on lead. We're going to practice something that I call let's go. So very simply, you've got your dog on your lead next to you, walking mostly to heel, mooching about, and then you're going to go, let's go. You're going to take a step backwards, making sure it's safe, obviously. You're going to use some food to lure the dog up in front of you. So now your dog's sat up in front looking at you. This is my dog's ears, obviously. And then from there, you can either hold the collar, get the dog focusing on you, and you can introduce a cue like watch as well, and you can give them some lovely sweeties, or you can play with a tuggy toy, anything that occupies them. And from there, you can either use your body to block them. So I'm quite a big fan of like, morning, yeah, my dog doesn't really like other dogs. Yeah, I know, it's sad, isn't it? And the other dog's gone. Or we can change direction. So we're walking forward. Oh, there's a dog I don't like. Let's go. And then we turn on our heel and go in another direction or disappear up an alleyway. Any of those kind of things. It's important to practice your let's go when there aren't other dogs around, and it's important that the reward for a good let's go is something really good. So really good food, really good play. I also like scatter feeding is quite good for this. So as long as it's a relatively big and safe area, you're helping the dog do that fiddle about one of the 5 F's. So you sprinkle some food, they can have a snuffle round. That often gives you a little bit more space to get the other dog past and makes it kind of a longer, more rewarding thing for the dog. So you can certainly mix up your rewards with that. Over a period of time, initially I'm wanting the let's go to happen almost before my dog, or pretty much before my dog has really realised that there's another dog there. So walking along with Secret, I'd be like, oh, a dog there, yeah, let's get out of the way. Over time though, you need to let them see that other dog so that they know what you are rewarding them for not reacting to. So you want to catch them just at that space where they go from being relaxed and chilled and on their walk to, what's that? And you need to yourself stay really aware, but not overstressed about it. So the minute you see, is that a dog? Oh yes, it's a dog, let's go. And we do something fun. It takes quite a long time, but once they start getting it, at some point you will see a change in your dog's behaviour from, oh God, there's another dog, to, there's another dog, we're going to play that game. And interestingly, my reformed dog now, she's really quite funny. If another dog walks past and she feels that she's controlled herself really well and not done anything naughty, she will then bash my hand to kind of say, did you see that? Did you see that? I was really good. I didn't go for that dog. And she would like to demand some treats for it. So I know with her that I have changed her mindset. She's now not thinking, oh God, what's that dog going to do to me? She's like, I can do this, I've got this. If I walk past this dog, I get treats from my mum. So they are fun. You do feel like a bit of a Burke going on your walk and changing direction, doing these let's goes. But I think anything on your walk that keeps your dog more working with you, so doing some sits, doing some heel work, hiding a toy in some long grass, scattering some food, anything that keeps your dog's mind on having a lovely walk with you and not having a horrible walk thinking about what's around the next corner will really help to reduce their reactivity. Sometimes though, as pet professionals working with reactive dogs rather than just pet owners, we will come across those dogs that are finding it a little bit more difficult to learn these new skills. And this is when certainly I would first of all look at using breakthrough and then possibly look at medications for some of the dogs. So most dogs whose anxiety is relatively low level will learn these new things really easily. So you introduce some scatter feeding, you start doing some sit stays downs on your walks, you start introducing the let's go, and they will very quickly learn that. Certainly with my own reformed reactive dog, I did use breakthrough for about 9 months, and that helped raise levels of helpful neurotransmitters in her brain, relaxed her generally, and then made her more open to learning these new skills. So I definitely think that helped. And obviously if you're looking at introducing a food like breakthrough, you're then going to be thinking, what can I use as my training treats? Ideally we want them to be compatible with the breakthrough diet, and luckily we've got the train up training treats, which are really palatable, which is a good thing, and you can break those up and use them in quite small quantities quite happily with the diet. My personal preference, even though I am a vet and can prescribe the medications, I tend not to use medications first off in all but my most serious reactivity cases. And I certainly want to, I think I'd be looking at behavioural modification and diet for a good 4 to 6 weeks before I thought about medications. A slightly different area to consider, one that I think about as a vet, is how we deal with these lead reactive dogs when they have to come into practice, or if you're running a training class, how we deal with them in a training class. Because I think it is really important. I often recommend that these dogs, once they are a little bit less anxious, that they do get out into training classes, either obedience classes, agility, not fly ball generally. That would be because of the amount of barking and the speed at which dogs are moving in fly ball, it isn't the best for a reactive dog, certainly in the early stages. But with obedience or rally, agility, hoopers, things like that, the other dogs at the class will be under control, and your reactive dog can learn that actually it's okay for these dogs to be moving about. They're engaged in a job with their owners and they're not actually interested in bothering you. And I've found that really useful with my own dog and with others. So if you're running a class, think about how we make these dogs feel safe. So we might want to use some barriers so that in the sitting down talky bits, the dog doesn't feel like he's being eyeballed by other dogs. The agility class I go to, there are some cages available with blankets over, and the most reactive dogs will pop into those between their runs so they can have a little chill out. Lots of training classes now will use boards to section dogs off so that they're not either interacting. It's amazing sometimes in a training class for me how people will be so intent on listening to the trainer, and the trainer will be so intent on training that they miss what's going on with the dog. So they might be listening how to do the next exercise and the dog is actually inappropriately sniffing or pawing or annoying another poor dog. So using some barriers will really help with that. In the veterinary situation where I'm working most of the time, obviously the waiting room is not as big as I would like it to be. It's pretty big, but it's not infinite. And again, we can use boards to section off quiet areas, or something that did a positive that came out of COVID. Some people would prefer to stay in their cars until their appointment time, and so we got little pagers or would ring them when it was their time rather than having to sit in the waiting room, because again, that's definitely another trigger. The dog's in the vet's waiting room, probably not super happy about being there, maybe they didn't enjoy the car journey, maybe they met another dog on the way in, and then they're sitting there feeling vulnerable, feeling often the owner's holding on tightly to the lead for grim death. We're much more likely to get reactivity in that waiting room when a dog goes past, and we want to avoid that. In a few cases, and I know some behaviourists who will do this, I very rarely work with stooge dogs. I do use my faithful old nanny McRoo occasionally. So some really reactive dogs, both owners and the behaviourist and trainer might feel happier initially to do any interactions with, first of all, stuffed dogs. And you may have noticed my really well behaved golden retriever puppy in the background. That's as close as I get to having a stuffed stooge dog, but there are some fabulous stuffed stooge dogs out there, some really convincing little Jack Russells and Labradors and things like that, standing up Labradors. I've even seen trainers put them on wheels so that somebody can secretly move them like they're a real dog, and that can be a good first way to practice some of these techniques. So I'd practice them first of all, whichever exact method of training you're going to use. I say I use my let's go, look at me and let's go, to first of all use those with stuffed animals, because their behaviour is guaranteed to be good. Then we might work up to a trainer's stooge dog, so you need a really good handler, you need a dog with really good social skills. When I've done this, I've sometimes done it up at my field with a fence in between us so that nothing can go wrong, and that has allowed me to make nanny room more and more exciting. So the other dog will just be on leads with the dogs on the outside, humans on the middle, and we'll say hello over the fence. So morning, how are you? Brilliant. I'm feeding the dog that's being trained is getting some reward there, maybe some scatter feeding, maybe a play, and then we might build up to my dog being off the lead. So she's running around, she's doing some hunting, she's doing some fetching, maybe running towards the fence with the other dog on the other side of it, and that allows the handler to practice controlling their dog, moving them away from that situation, rewarding them for not overreacting to that situation in a safe way. But the reason that I don't do that too often personally is because it's impossible to avoid all these interactions in the real world in the meantime. So I do like to work, not looking for other dogs to work with, but I like to give my owners the skills, maybe in the field, maybe in a safe position like that, and then let them practice those out in the real world, because that's where you're going to be in the end eventually. Yeah, so I think that's all I've got to say today on lead reactivity. They are definitely rehabilitatable, and it can happen quite quickly, and they're a favourite of mine to work with. Remember to like and follow us on all the social medias that we have. We've also got some other blogs on training and reactivity, and possibly some slightly different methods for doing that, if you check out the health and advice section on our website.